Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we take the source material you've shared with us and go deep, way deep, to extract the core knowledge, the surprising facts, and the big picture.
And today we are tackling a giant.
A true giant. We're diving into the life and legacy of James Joseph Brown, a man whose presence in music was, it was less a genre and more like a seismic event.
It's the ultimate deep dive into complexity, really. Born in 1933, died in 2006. And his career didn't just span decades. It fundamentally rewrote the rules of popular music.
You don't get a list of nicknames like he had by just, being good.
Oh, not at all. Think about them. Mr. Dynamite, the hardest working man in show business.
My favorite is Minister of New Super Heavy Funk.
Right. And of course, Godfather of Soul, King of Soul, Soul Brother #1. You get those by creating an entirely new architecture of sound.
Exactly. And our mission today is to unpack that very complexity, tracing the line between the musical genius and the deeply troubled man behind it all.
He is, without a doubt, the central progenitor of funk music.
And through that, he laid the rhythmic foundation for basically everything that followed. R&B, soul, and, most powerfully, hip-hop.
Think about this statistic for a second. Our sources say he is, to this day, the world's most sampled recording artist.
That's not just influence. That is the very DNA woven into the fabric of modern music.
And that influence was backed up by just a relentless, commercially successful output, but in a very idiosyncratic way.
What do you mean by that?
Well, the sources confirm he had 17 singles reach #1 on the Billboard R&B charts.
17, which is a phenomenal achievement. That puts him right at the very top of R&B history.
It does. But here's the fascinating contradictory wrinkle in those stats, and I think it speaks volumes about his unique position.
Okay.
He also holds the record for the most singles on the Billboard Hot 100 that did not reach #1.
Wow. That is the key insight, isn't it?
He is. He was a phenomenon who was deeply successful, culturally dominant, without really needing the mainstream pop machine.
He built his own lane.
He engineered his own lane, exactly. He cultivated his own audience, mostly through the R&B charts and that grueling touring circuit. It meant his revolutionary sound, that raw, percussive funk. It never had to be watered down for crossover appeal.
So our goal for you, the listener, is to understand the full scope of this paradoxical genius.
Right. How could one man maintain such an unmatched level of professional discipline and drive, creating a cultural movement?
While at the same time battling poverty, law enforcement, his own personal demons, and ultimately a 15-year legal war over his own legacy after he was gone.
It's an incredible story. We're going to trace that line from his earliest, harshest beginnings right up to the final ruling on his estate.
Okay, let's unpack this history. And we have to start at the roots of the man who branded himself the hardest working man in show business.
And James Brown's origins were unbelievably harsh.
He was born James Joseph Brown in Barnwell, South Carolina in 1933. Though, fun fact, his name was mistakenly reversed on the birth certificate.
Yeah, it was supposed to be Joseph James Brown. And the family lived in just dire poverty in Elko before moving to Augusta, Georgia, when he was just 4 or 5 years old.
And the adversity began immediately.
Oh, yeah. It profoundly shaped his need for control and success later on. His mother left the family after a contentious, abusive marriage. She essentially abandoned him.
So he was just bouncing between relatives.
He was, including one aunt whose home, and this is a crucial detail, operated as a brothel.
It's so important to pause on that. He's spending his foundational years in an environment where survival means observation, it means performance, and it means understanding these really transactional relationships.
It's an intense pressure cooker for a child.
Right. And where a lot of kids might just internalize that chaos, it seems like Brown internalized the need for absolute order and hustle.
Precisely. You can see the genesis of that famous drive right there in Augusta. As a kid, he performed buck dances, which is a style of rhythmic, percussive dance.
You do it for change.
For change. For troops from Camp Gordon during World War II convoys. He was a professional entertainer working for tips before he was even 10 years old.
He was also teaching himself music skills, right? Piano, guitar.
Harmonica, yeah. He was inspired by titans like Louis Jordan. He even tried a brief boxing career in his teens, which shows you like aggressive, competitive nature right from the start.
But that relentless struggle, it led to a crucial stumble.
It did. At 16, he was convicted of robbery and sent to a juvenile detention center in Toccoa, Georgia.
And this really negative moment, paradoxically, sets the stage for his entire career.
It does, because that's where he met the man who would become his lifelong musical foil, Bobby Bird.
Bird was instrumental.
Completely. He heard about Brown, who was known in prison as Music Box, and the two of them formed a gospel quartet with other inmates.
And Bird's family had connections.
They did, and they helped secure Brown's parole in 1952 on work sponsorship. It was all contingent on Brown promising the court he would sing for the Lord.
A promise that quickly evolved.
Very quickly. It turned to secular music, but that discipline he learned in the religious setting, that never left him.
So he gets out, he joins Bird's group. It keeps changing names, right? The Gospel Starlighters, then the Avons.
And they finally settled on the famous Flames. Their sound at first was really heavily influenced by those smooth, harmonizing R&B vocal groups of the era. The Orioles were a big touchstone.
And then comes the breakthrough.
Please, Please, Please in 1956. It was born almost by accident. Little Richard apparently wrote the phrase on a napkin for him.
And the song was just raw, pure emotion.
An immediate sensation. It sold over 1 million copies and launched James Brown and the Famous Flames right onto the national R&B map.
But it wasn't easy after that. They struggled to get a follow-up hit.
They did, until 1958 when they released this sophisticated ballad called Try Me.
And that proved they weren't one-hit wonders.
Exactly. It shot to #1 on the R&B chart in 1959, and that was a foundational moment. It was the first of his 17 chart-topping R&B hits.
And 1959 brings another career milestone, debuting at the Apollo Theater.
The hallowed Apollo Theater, opening for his idol, the great Little Willie John. Brown was already building a reputation, but he was still a rising star.
The transition from rising star to genuine cultural icon, though, that required something revolutionary. And that happened in 1963.
And here's where it gets really interesting, because this shows the unique business acumen of James Brown. We're talking about the legendary Live at the Apollo album.
So why was this such a game changer? It's more than just a great concert recording.
Oh, it was a monumental act of rebellion and foresight. The president of King Records, Sid Nathan, he just scoffed at the idea.
Record companies just didn't believe live albums sold.
Not at all. They figured fans who liked Brown already owned his singles, so why buy them again? Nathan refused to finance it.
And Brown's response?
He financed the whole thing himself. Used his own money, which was a massive financial risk at the time.
Because he knew something the label didn't.
He instinctively understood that the raw, unmatched energy of his live performance was something the studio could never capture.
Yeah.
And he knew the public would pay for it.
And boy, was he right.
He was completely vindicated. The album was an immediate smash. Reached #2 on the top LPs chart, which was, virtually unheard of for an R&B record at that time.
And it stayed on the charts for, what was it?
An incredible 14 months. Sold over 1 million copies. It proved Brown knew his audience and his product better than any executive. It gave him the leverage to control his own destiny.
And that momentum just pushes him toward this clear genre shift.
You see it right away. The hits that came right after Apollo Out of Sight in '64, Papa's Got a Brand New Bag in '65.
Which was his first top 10 pop hit, right? Got him his first Grammy.
That's the one. And those songs showed a clear pivot away from the old R&B ballads and toward that rhythmic, aggressive sound we now call funk.
And you could see it, too. Visually, this new energy was broadcast to the whole world during the 1964 TAMI show Concert Film.
Oh, that performance. The source material calls it an explosive, show-stopping performance. And that's an understatement.
The energy, the precise vocals, the choreography.
It was so intense that it famously upstaged the film's closing act, the Rolling Stones. Mick Jagger himself said following them was the biggest mistake of his career.
And that solidified the Mr. Dynamite persona on a national level. It put the world on notice that a new physical and musical force had arrived.
That brings us to the true crucible of the funk revolution, the late 1960s. This is the period where James Brown fully earns that title, Soul Brother #1.
Because he's systematically stripping music down to its most kinetic, its most rhythmic essence.
And if we're going to dive deep into the technical nature of his genius, we have to start with a universally recognized moment of creation, the 1967 song Cold Sweat.
Music critics all point to this one. They call it the first true funk song. So let's unpack that. Why is it so revolutionary?
Okay, so it completely redefined the fundamental role of every single musician on that stage.
What way?
Traditionally, R&B and soul, they emphasized melody, harmony, chord progressions. The song goes somewhere. Brown just flipped the script.
Cold Sweat reduced the harmony to a single chord.
A single chord. It makes the entire song fundamentally static from a harmonic perspective. It doesn't move.
So if the harmony isn't changing, what becomes the focal point for the listener?
The rhythmic complexity. It shifts the entire emphasis to the pattern of attack points, the precise moment each instrument hits a note or a beat.
And this style required all these interlocking, syncopated parts.
Right. The bass lines became strutting and aggressive, the drums focused on these complex syncopated patterns, and the guitar, often played by Jimmy Nolan, became purely percussive.
It sounds more like a hi-hat than a lead instrument.
Exactly. And this is where we get to the core concept of the one. This is something that's talked about a lot, but, rarely explained clearly.
So can you define what Brown actually meant by the one?
Okay, so Brown's concept of the one is the gravitational center of the funk universe. In standard pop music, the main rhythmic focus is usually on the 2 and the 4, the backbeat. You clap on the 2 and 4.
Right, the snare drum hits.
Exactly. Brown's instruction to his band was to make the first beat of the bar the 1, the central point of attack for all the instruments.
So every instrument is locking in precisely around that downbeat, but they're playing off it in a syncopated way, which creates this rhythmic tension.
That's it perfectly. Imagine a chain link fence where every single player is a separate link, and the only point where they all meet is on the 1.
So they're playing around it.
They're intentionally playing around it, creating what feels like controlled chaos, or the grease, as Brown sometimes called it. When that rhythm section Starks or Stubblefield on drums, the bass, Nolan's guitar, when they lock in, it creates this relentless driving loop.
And that loop is the song. The groove is everything.
The groove is everything. And his vocals followed this rhythmic shift, too. His singing style changed dramatically during this period.
Right, it became this rhythmic declamation.
Yes. It wasn't quite singing a melodic line, and it wasn't quite spoken word. He was using his voice as another percussive instrument.
The shouts, the grunts.
The repeating phrases, all to build intensity and guide the band. That technique, that use of vocal rhythm and repetition to pump energy, that is a direct, major influence on the development of rapping. He basically created the prototype for the MC.
And the legacy is just, it's quantifiable. The sources confirm that tracks like Funky Drummer from 1969 with Clyde Stubblefield on the drums
Were just immortalized by the hip-hop generation. That specific 8-bar drum break was sampled so extensively that it earned the nickname the national anthem of hip-hop.
The fact that he's the world's most sampled recording artist is proof that he literally wrote the rhythmic dictionary for popular music moving forward.
And this technical mastery was only possible because of the, frankly, terrifying discipline Brown enforced on his live ensemble.
The James Brown Review, it was, what, 40 to 50 people?
40 to 50 people. And he demanded perfection. Precision, adherence to the uniform tuxedos, cummerbunds, shined patent leather shoes, and absolute instant adherence to his every command.
Which brings us to the legendary fines. His showmanship wasn't just for the crowd, it was management by intimidation.
Absolutely. That famous moment where he would slide across the stage or spin around, seemingly just dancing, that was often him communicating.
He was flashing hand signals.
Flashing hand signals or splayed fingers to alert musicians who missed a note or a rhythmic attack point that they owed him a fine.
Miss a cue. That's $50 out of your paycheck.
Show up late. 100. It's an
Yeah.
insane system that really reflects his origins.
He was terrified of going back to that poverty he experienced in the brothel.
So he enforced this capitalist, highly disciplined structure on his artistry. The pursuit of rhythmic perfection was inseparable from the pursuit of professional perfection.
It was a crucible, though. It forced incredible talent to rise.
We have to recognize the key people who came through that system, many from a demanding jazz tradition. Bobby Byrd, of course, trombonist Fred Wesley, saxophonists Maceo Parker, and Alfred P.V. Ellis.
And the powerhouse drummers John Jabo Starks and Clyde Stubblefield.
Brown was a demanding, tyrannical band leader, but he blended the raw simplicity of R&B drive with the complex, precise demands of jazz syncopation.
And as his musical popularity soared, he expanded his business empire.
Right. In the late 1960s, Brown started buying several radio stations, securing media power to match his artistic power.
He bought WRDW in his native Augusta, the same town where he used to shine shoes as a boy.
An amazing full-circle moment. And he bought WJBE in Knoxville, Tennessee, famously using his own initials for the call letters.
And the slogan was WJBE 1430 Raw Soul.
Which was a perfect brand statement. He wasn't just a performer anymore, he was a media mogul focused on Black entrepreneurship.
And he also showed this immediate desire to cross over, even at the height of his funk experimentation.
Yes, he diversified his recordings. He released romantic ballads, even a couple of albums of jazz standards with the De Felice Trio and the Louis Bellson Orchestra.
Things like Getting Down to It and Soul on Top.
Exactly. It just illustrates his constant desire to expand his market reach beyond just the typical R&B audience. He was always thinking bigger.
Okay, so moving into the 1970s, the financial disputes that were always kind of simmering under the surface of the James Brown Review, they finally boiled over.
Yeah, the decade starts with a massive disruption.
The band walkout of 1970. In March of that year, the majority of his road band, we're talking key players like Maceo Parker and Fred Wesley, they just quit.
All over financial disputes. It mirrored the earlier, though less severe, disbandment of the famous Flames back in '68.
But Brown, ever the hardest working man, he didn't stop for a second.
Not for a second. He and the remaining stalwart Bobby Byrd, they immediately rebuilt. They recruited these young guys from Cincinnati.
Bootsy Collins on bass and his brother Phelps Catfish Collins on guitar.
From the band The Pacemakers. And this new unit became the JBs.
And their very first record was just lightning in a bottle. Get Up, I Feel Like Being a Sex Machine.
An instant classic. And that track absolutely refined the concept of the one.
It cemented the funk sound with that heavy emphasis on the off-the-beat play, as Brown called it.
And Bootsy Collins' bass line, in particular, was just liquid fire driving, syncopated, and so deeply percussive.
Yet that brilliant first iteration of the JBs was incredibly short-lived.
It dissolved after only about a year following a European tour in March 1971.
Money disputes were always a factor, but there was more to it this time.
Yeah, Bootsy Collins' now infamous use of LSD played a major role in the breakup. Brown had this strict, absolute drug and alcohol-free policy for his entire entourage.
So when he suspected the Collins brothers and others were on drugs during a performance,
He fired them immediately after the show. The chaos that fueled his best music also constantly burned out his most talented players. It's a recurring theme.
despite that internal drama, the 70s continued to bring him commercial success and cultural cachet.
Oh, yeah. He provided the score for the blaxploitation film Black Caesar. And he returned to the #1 R&B spot in 1974 with that aggressive driving track, The Payback.
And that same year, he hit #1 R&B 2 more times with My Thang and Papa Don't Take No Mess.
It thoroughly cemented his title as the Godfather of Soul, right in the heart of the emerging disco era.
Now, we have to transition to the most complex and, often contradictory aspect of his public life, his social commentary and his political engagement.
Brown was not a predictable political figure. He was an entrepreneur and a survivalist first and foremost,
On one hand, you have his vocal advocacy for youth education.
which was directly motivated by his own impoverished past. He dropped out in the 7th grade because he didn't have sufficient clothing.
So he channeled that focus into the pro-education song, Don't Be a Dropout, and donated the royalties to charity.
And this advocacy earned him recognition from President Lyndon B. Johnson, who cited Brown as a positive role model, which was a monumental achievement for a black artist from the segregated South.
But his politics were always contrarian, especially on racial and military matters.
In 1968, right at the height of the Vietnam War opposition, he records America Is My Home. It's a staunchly patriotic song.
And in it, he encourages listeners to stop pitying yourselves and get up and fight.
He performed for troops in Vietnam, a move that alienated a lot of activists who felt he should take a stronger anti-war stance. He was accused of being too close to the establishment.
This political high-wire act really came to a head the day after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. in April 1968.
Yes, the Boston Garden Concert. This is a spectacular piece of political theater.
To set the stage for us, the mayor, Kevin White, was facing an imminent riot in the city.
White was desperate to prevent Boston from erupting like other American cities were. And against the very strong advice of his police chief, he orchestrated a plan.
To broadcast Brown's performance citywide for free on public television.
The logic was simple. Keep potential rioters off the streets by having them stay home to watch the show.
And it worked. It was an incredible de-escalation tactic. But James Brown, the hardest working man in show business,
Was never going to work for free.
never. After preventing a riot, he immediately played hardball.
He demanded $60,000 for the gate fees he felt he lost because the concert was televised for free.
And he threatened to expose the secret, politically sensitive arrangement if the city refused.
Which would have been devastating for Mayor White and could have reignited the very tensions he'd just managed to cool.
The sources reveal this desperate scramble that followed. Mayor White had to lobby an influential power brokering group known as the Vault to help raise the money.
In the end, Brown got $15,000 from the city, and White convinced the garden management to forfeit their share of receipts to cover the rest.
After that successful, though very controversial intervention, he was even called by President Johnson.
To use his influence to urge other riot-ravaged cities to cool it. There's another way. He had become a genuine political broker.
And yet, later that very same summer of 1968, he completely reverses direction.
To satisfy the demands of black activists like H. Rep. Brown, he wrote the lyrics to Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud, with his band leader Pee Wee Ellis composing the music.
And it becomes an anthem, a defining cultural marker of the Black Power movement.
And this is where the nuance of his political duality truly emerges, because he was later deeply ambivalent about that song's impact, even while recognizing its power.
He said it has done more for the black race than any other record.
But he also said he regretted defining anyone by race, noting that teaching race ultimately teaches separatism.
He even admitted the song cost him a massive chunk of his crossover audience. His concert demographics became mostly black after that.
But ever the pragmatist, he stood by it. He said it was necessary at the time to teach pride to a generation that desperately needed it.
His political support was just bafflingly fluid.
Because it was based less on ideology and more on opportunity or this idea of self-reliance, he supported Democrats like Johnson, Humphrey, Kennedy, and Carter.
But he also openly supported Republicans Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan.
His endorsement of Nixon in 1972 was particularly damaging in the black community. It led to boycotts of his records, protests where he was labeled James Brown, Nixon's clown.
People just could not reconcile the voice of Say It Loud with a supporter of the Republican establishment.
He just saw himself as an outsider, supporting whatever politician he felt promoted his vision of black entrepreneurship and self-reliance, which sometimes aligned with conservative fiscal policies.
And he later reversed his support for Nixon with a classic funk track.
You can have Watergate. Just give me some bucks and I'll be straight. He simply said he was neither Democrat nor Republican. He was for James Brown.
And finally, we have to mention his unexpected relationship with the Reverend Al Sharpton.
Right. Brown mentored the young activist in the 1970s, convincing him to drop Alfred and just go by Al Sharpton.
And Sharpton actually served as Brown's tour manager from 1973 to 1980.
That mentorship is a defining moment for Sharpton. He later reflected that he learned from Brown that you're going to have to be dramatic in order to get people to see things that they are not inclined to see.
So Brown taught him to command attention, to use spectacle.
The exact same lesson Brown used to prevent the Boston riots.
As we move into the later part of his career, we see this divergence. His music sales are fluctuating, but he has this unexpected cultural resurgence.
Thanks to Hollywood and hip-hop, by 1977, Brown was no longer the dominant R&B force. The slick, synthesized, four-on-the-floor rhythm of disco had superseded his raw one-chord funk.
And a lot of his key bandmates, like Fred Wesley and Maceo Parker, they saw the writing on the wall.
They pivoted. They moved on to join the Parliament Funkadelic Collective.
So the 1980s required a strategic pivot for Brown. He turned to Hollywood to reignite his public profile.
He appeared in the Blues Brothers in 1980 as Reverend Cleophas James, followed by roles in Dr. Detroit, and then, most significantly, the global blockbuster Rocky IV in 1985.
And Rocky V provided the perfect stage for his last major pop hit.
Living in America in 1986. It was his first top 40 entry since 1974 and his final top 10 pop hit ever. It even won him a Grammy.
So even as he was fighting for relevance in the studio, his presence in pop culture was still massive.
And crucially, the new generation was ensuring his artistic survival. While his own record sales struggled, his foundational rhythms became central to the emerging hip-hop sound.
MC Hammer, Big Daddy Kane, they brought Brown's energetic dance moves and, more importantly, sampled his iconic drum breaks constantly.
That drum break from the second version of Give It Up or Turn It Loose became so popular for breakdance battles that Curtis Blow dubbed it the national anthem of hip-hop.
The irony is just incredible. Even when James Brown wasn't hitting the charts, his ghost was fueling the next music revolution.
However, this late career resurgence was consistently undermined by a deeply troubled private life and escalating legal issues.
It stood in such stark contrast to his public discipline.
That contradiction, the man who demanded professional perfection versus the man who lived in personal chaos, it's just heartbreaking.
Despite Brown's strict public stance against drugs for his band, his own drug use began in the mid-1980s.
Yeah, there were reports of him using PCP, and often mixing cocaine with tobacco in his cool
And
cigarettes.
this drug use tragically correlated with severe domestic violence incidents, which the sources detail in painful specificity.
There was his ill-fated relationship with Tammy Terrell in the mid-60s. She left due to his abusive behavior, with former Famous Flames members claiming they witnessed him beat her terribly.
And his contentious third marriage to Adrienne Rodriguez from 84 to 96 was just plagued by public abuse.
Between 1987 and 1995, Brown was arrested multiple times for domestic violence against her, including shocking incidents where she reported being beaten with an iron pipe and being shot at. This was a documented pattern.
And the most famous legal incident is still the 1988 high-speed car chase.
On Interstate 20, near the Georgia-South Carolina border, he was accused of carrying an unlicensed pistol, assaulting a police officer, drug offenses, driving offenses.
It resulted in a 6-year sentence. He ended up serving 2.5 years before he was paroled in 1991.
And this is a complex event we had to unpack. Brown's FBI file, which was released years later, contained his counter-narrative.
He claimed the chase didn't happen as police said, and that local police had actually shot at his car several times during what he alleged was intense, targeted police harassment.
He also claimed he was assaulted after his arrest.
Now, local authorities found no merit to these accusations. They were never proven in court.
But the fact that Brown, the man who once sought protection from presidential intervention, had an FBI file detailing his own claims of harassment, it speaks to the perpetual tension he maintained with authority figures his entire life.
And even after parole, the legal troubles just continued. Civil suits, wrongful termination claims.
Allegations of demanding sexual favors. He was even arrested in 2004 for domestic violence against his final partner, Tommy Ray Heine, and pled no contest to the charge.
By the mid-2000s, his health was clearly failing.
His longtime manager noted he lived with undiagnosed type 2 diabetes for years, though he had been successfully treated for prostate cancer in 2004.
But he was still maintaining that legendary, grueling touring schedule.
And the end came very quickly in December 2006. He was hospitalized with pneumonia, and his longtime manager, Charles Bobbitt, recalled Brown stuttering a final goodbye.
I'm going away tonight.
He died on Christmas Day 2006 at age 73 from congestive heart failure.
And we should note the controversial element of his death. A 2019 CNN investigation raised suggestions that Brown may have been murdered,
citing conflicting medical reports and the disappearance of key witnesses. While this has never been substantiated, it remains part of the dramatic, complex narrative around his final moments.
And then came the long, long drama over his financial soul, the 15-year battle over his estate.
Brown had signed his last will in 2000, establishing an irrevocable trust intended to benefit disadvantaged children and provide scholarships for his grandchildren.
And crucially, this will explicitly omitted his final partner, Tommy Ray Heine, and their son, James Brown Jr.
The legal marathon revolved entirely around one question. Was his marriage to Heine legally valid?
If she was legally his widow, she would have rights to a significant portion of the estate, regardless of what the will said.
The complexity lay in her prior marriage. She married another man before Brown, and while she claimed that marriage was annulled, the annulment did not occur until after her marriage ceremony with Brown.
So Brown's attorney argued that under South Carolina law, a marriage is invalid if a spouse isn't legally free from a previous one.
This single, highly technical legal point was the battleground for over a decade.
And the South Carolina Supreme Court finally ruled in 2020 that Tommy Ray Heine was not legally married to Brown,
because of her failure to properly annul her previous marriage before marrying him. That ruling confirmed she had no legal right to any part of his estate, validating Brown's original, stated, philanthropic intent.
The legal marathon finally settled in 2021, 15 years after his death.
15 years before the trust could finally move forward.
The ultimate takeaway from this deep dive really is that profound contradiction.
Yeah, the sheer chaos and conflict of his personal and financial life stood in direct, bizarre contrast to the legacy of technical perfection and rigid discipline he created on stage.
What remains is the music. And the institutional recognition is just massive and undeniable.
He was one of the first 10 inductees into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1986. Decades later, his original vocal group, the Famous Flames, were retroactively inducted in 2012, recognizing their foundational contribution.
He also got the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award in '92 and the prestigious Kennedy Center Honors in 2003.
And when Rolling Stone ranked the 100 greatest artists of all time, he landed at number 7. Just illustrates his undisputed, towering cultural standing.
And the public memorials were designed to be as grand and dynamic as his performances.
Oh, absolutely. Services at the Apollo Theater in Harlem, the James Brown Arena in Augusta, Georgia, attended by everyone from Michael Jackson to Prince.
And his body, in a bronze polished casket, was driven to the Apollo in a white glass-encased horse-drawn carriage.
The ultimate showman's exit.
And Augusta, his childhood home, completely embraced his legend. Not only do they have the James Brown Arena and a life-size bronze statue,
They also renamed a section of 9th Street James Brown Boulevard, and my favorite obscure tribute, which just shows his reach.
the bridge in Colorado.
The James Brown Soul Center of the Universe Bridge in Steamboat Springs, Colorado, named by a poll of residents in 1993. It's fantastic.
When you reflect on the totality of it, his genius really lay in his editorial choices.
As a songwriter, producer, and band leader, he kept things sparse and focused entirely on the groove. He created an environment where the funkiest players could play what they felt.
Under the terrifying threat of being fined.
Exactly. This constant demand for technical perfection from his bands is what fueled his musical innovations. It created the stripped-down, rhythm-first approach that defines so much of modern music.
The contradiction is the story. The disciplined architect of sound versus the troubled, chaotic figure fighting constantly in court and at home.
He worked harder than anyone to achieve artistic perfection, only to live a life riddled with perpetual turmoil and conflict.
And that contrast leads us right to the final provocative question we want to leave you with today.
Given James Brown's career-long vocal advocacy for education, from his Don't Be a Dropout campaign to his speeches in schools, and his stated philanthropic vision established in his final will,
How might the James Brown sound, the ultimate expression of self-reliance, funk, and power, how might it have evolved if that 15-year legal battle over his estate hadn't diverted all those resources and attention from his final stated vision, creating a trust fund for disadvantaged children?
it's a powerful thought to consider. Did the fight for his soul, which was so evident in his struggle for artistic control, become tragically overshadowed by the fight for his money after his death? And did that rob the next generation of the benefit of his genius?
A great way to explore this further is just diving into his expansive discography. Start with the StarTime box set for a comprehensive overview of his evolution.
Or just put on Live at the Apollo to understand the genesis of the hardest working man. You won't regret it.
That's all for this deep dive. Thank you for joining us in unpacking the extraordinary, difficult, and profoundly influential life of the Godfather of Soul, James Brown.